Welcome to Around the A.U.D.L. I'm Richard Rodawalt. Joining me, Matt Douglas. We're going to recap last weekend's games. We also have an interview with one of the stars of the Detroit Mechanics and some Cranes drama, Matt. A lot going on.
Oh, it was a huge week for the A.U.D.L. It didn't look like it so much going into the week. Maybe some games people were counting off. Rhode Island was playing against a winless Buffalo Hunters who sat at 0-11. You had the worst team in the West, or the team at the bottom of the West, going in to take on the best team in the East. Not a lot expected out of this week, but it was a good week.
It was a good week, and you mentioned the Buffalo Hunters getting their first win. We'll talk a little bit about that. That actually had a little bit of pull in the playoff race, as we do have one of our playoff matchups set in stone.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that in today's show, and that should be another classic as we have. But joining us right now, Detroit Mechanics player, we have Mark Worsfold. And Mark, you guys went into Philly. You got your first road win of the season. What was the key to victory?
It had to have been our defense. We came into that game knowing what they do, and their offense being so efficient that our game plan, we just had to disrupt what they like to do and how they like to play. They really like to work that under game to open up the deep. Well, we kept that pressure on their under game and really covered up their deeps and put a pressure on the marks to not give easy throws when they wanted to go deep. And our defense just did such a great job keeping that intensity up the whole entire game.
That's great. We've heard defense talk about being a key to any aspect in the game of ultimate, but this was absolutely a huge win for you guys. You had to go into an Eastern Division team, play against them on their home field. Not only that, they've yet to lose at home. Was this maybe the biggest win for DMX?
So far, I think it is. We seem to have a knack for knocking off divisional leaders. This week with Philadelphia, we knocked off the Bluegrass Revolution, giving them their first loss, and then the Alley Cats as well. But this one is definitely, I think, top on the list.
All right, Mark, as it comes down to it, you guys have 3 weeks left in the season, 3 games, 2 against division opponents. What can DMX do to make their way into one of those final 2 playoff spots?
I think we know what's on the line. We know what we need to do, and I think our focus and intensity is there to make that happen. We've played the Cranes before. We've played the Revolution before, beating both those teams, and so we know what they do, what we have to do, and both those games are at home. So I think we've got the advantage on those games.
Always a pleasure to talk with you. We'll look to see you in Detroit this weekend, but thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, bud.
And there you have it, Matt. I mean, we've talked time and time again on Cranes Weekly and on our post-game shows. Any team, any week, is capable of going in and getting a victory. And you see the Detroit Mechanics go in, and they give a loss to the #1 team, not only in the East, but in the entire A.U.D.L.
Yeah, it looked like the Philadelphia Spinners were riding high. It didn't look like anyone was going to touch them in the East, especially when they played at home in front of the big crowds that they're used to playing in front of.
It's a little ironic. You have a team go into Philly and play the Rocky card.
Mm-hmm.
They play the underdog, and you heard Mark talk a little bit about it. They kind of embrace that role, I think, especially when they're in the confines of the Silverdome, where they've beaten the Indianapolis Alley Cats, who were on a roll coming into the Silverdome. And as he mentioned, they gave the Bluegrass Revolution their first loss of the season.
Yeah, Detroit likes playing that role of the underdog. They're fine going into games, people counting them out. That's an absolutely good deal for them. Indianapolis was coming off a 4-game winning streak when they entered the Pontiac Silverdome for their last game against Detroit. Detroit comes away with the victory. The Bluegrass Revolution were 3-0, the best team in the A.U.D.L. at the time, the only undefeated team in the A.U.D.L. at the time. They take a loss at the hands of DMX. It didn't look like anyone was going to touch Philadelphia. Guess what? Here comes Detroit. They get their first road victory. As he mentioned, Mark Worsfold, this was maybe the biggest victory of the year so far for Detroit. They had to go out there on the road in front of a tough environment, 500-plus fans on hand to see this one, and you give the best team in the league right now, standings-wise, their second loss of the season, first at home.
Well, despite the loss for the Philadelphia Spinners, it was not all bad news this weekend. The Buffalo Hunters, they come out, they take care of business.
What a story there.
In not even thrilling fashion. They beat up on the Rhode Island Rampage, 24-15 victory. Hats off to the Buffalo Hunters. Sean Donnellan, who's had his team playing tough. You know, we talked to Chris Mazer on the program a couple weeks ago. He said the Buffalo team, you know, it just hasn't all come together for them.
Not yet.
And this week it was able to come together because they've been close. I mean, they were within a couple points of Connecticut, and they go out there and they beat a Rhode Island team who just has the misfortune of playing in the East. They could, if they were in the West, they might be right there with Indy as far as one of the best teams in the West.
I mean, taking a look at their record right now against that very tough, stacked Eastern Division, Rhode Island's right there in the mix. Had they been in the West, their record is good enough to maybe be fighting for one of those last 2 playoff spots. Unfortunately, they got dealt the hand they got dealt, and they're in the Eastern Division, and it hasn't been easy for them. But this was a game that Rhode Island needed to win, and you can't be thinking about the Buffalo Hunters as a slack team, and I assure you, nobody in the league did. You and I have had the chance to talk to a lot of players. Nobody takes this Buffalo Hunters team for granted because they're very good. They can come out, they can put up points, they can play tight defense. They've just been a little bit unlucky so far this season. They've played some very tight games against some very good ultimate teams. They just hadn't come away with a victory until this week. And hey, we talked about it before. This Buffalo Hunters team has that ability to play the role of spoiler. They just did it, knocking Rhode Island out of the playoffs and making it a nice, smooth, easy transition for Philadelphia and Connecticut in the East.
We did mention the good news for Philadelphia. That good news is they will host their playoff game against the Connecticut Constitution. Is already slated for August 4th, 7 o'clock in Philadelphia. So the Spinner family's got to be happy about that, as they'll get to host a home playoff game. And congratulations again to Buffalo. You know, you didn't want to see a team go through a whole season without tasting victory. Nobody roots for that. But on a week where you have the record-wise worst team in the East, where Detroit sat at 4-8 going into the weekend, and the Buffalo Hunters, who had not won a game yet, both come out with victories, shows a little bit of the parity of this league that we talked about. And like you said, it's unfortunate for Rhode Island; their playoff chances had to come to an end. But this is the A.U.D.L. It is not the NBA, folks, where if you're in the East, you're in the East. If you're in the West, you're in the West, and there's none of that crossing in between. So unfortunate for them. But here in Columbus, Ohio, we have a bit of a conundrum on our hands. It was told to us before the weekend started that the Columbus Cranes game in Lexington against the Bluegrass Revolution was going to be canceled due to heat.
Yes.
This may or may not have been the case, Matt?
I'm not exactly sure what the case was. Both you and I were contacted. We were told the game was postponed. All of a sudden, the standings come out on the A.U.D.L. website, and it says that the Bluegrass Revolution takes a 1-0 win in that, meaning essentially that the Columbus Cranes had forfeited that game to Kentucky's team, and they come away with a 1-0 victory, and this changed in the standings as well. So right now, I know that Michael Moses, the owner of the Columbus Cranes, is on the phone with the A.U.D.L., talking to the commissioner, talking to the owners, and saying, hey guys, this isn't right. We had worked this out that this would possibly be postponed, and now all of a sudden you're telling me I have to take a loss. It wasn't the only game postponed this week. He's got an argument. Rhode Island and Indianapolis didn't go underway either because of the heat they were facing.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It'd be one thing if you saw a similarity across the league, but just a little bit of confusion because the Cranes, going into the weekend, we're at 5-6.
And this is a tough loss to take. I mean, especially when the game was never played. This is a team they have to beat. This was a chance for them to jump up into that #2 spot in the playoffs right now in the A.U.D.L. Western Division. And they lose it at the hands of what essentially may be a forfeit. You know, people aren't happy on the Cranes side of things.
If the Cranes happen to miss out on the playoffs this year, you look back at the schedule and there's 2 games that stand out.
Yeah, people.
Both in Lexington.
Exactly. I mean, one game they didn't get to finish due to weather, and the other that they believed was postponed due to weather. Yeah,
so,
I mean that's exactly
Mother Nature
what it is.
Not friendly to the Cranes.
Apparently not. I mean, we saw the season started here in Columbus. It was wet, it was cold, and they've had some unlucky breaks when it comes to the weather.
They have, but you know what? I'm sure Michael Moses and the league will get that figured out. We will update everybody as soon as we know anything as well, so stay tuned. Going into this weekend, Detroit Mechanics still alive in the playoff race.
Very much so.
Host the Columbus Cranes. You heard the comments of Mark Worsfold. They also play host to the Bluegrass Revolution. The 2 teams ahead of them right now in the standings for that 2nd seed playoff. July 14th maybe marks the return of Brody Smith. We'll see. This Indianapolis Alley Cat team has been playing pretty well, has gotten some of that camaraderie and chemistry down. Will this be a positive or negative effect for Indy? We'll see.
Yeah.
Now, this has been Around the A.U.D.L. For Matt Douglas, Richard Rodawalt. Thanks for joining us.